Hello and welcome. Coming up tonight, why hasn't the Prime Minister resigned? I'll find out from the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy. Is it only a matter of time before he does? Sir John Curtice is somebody who definitely knows. Are the Greens the midwives of a looming reform government? I'll find out from their leader, Zack Polanski. Pippa and Streeting have absolutely startling data on what young people think of the European Union.
Our youth tracker is back and it shows how age remains one of the biggest dividing lines in politics.
And throughout the show, assessing whether Starmer is waving or drowning, we have the Tory grandee David Davis and Labour MP Polly Billington. Watcher, it's an unsettling time for me, maybe for you too, because, well, perhaps slightly unusually, I don't have answers to some pretty big questions, and as you probably know, I hate that. Here's my first uncertainty. If the appointment as US ambassador of Peter Mandelson, friend of the late paedophile billionaire Epstein, was reason enough for Morgan Sweeney to resign as Keir Starmer's chief of staff, why didn't it compel Keir Starmer himself to quit? Starmer says he's taking responsibility by saying sorry. Is he? Really? Question 2. If the perceived stability of the UK has been damaged by having too many prime ministers in quick succession since 2016, they were all Tory, in case you forgot, is Starmer right that it's his national duty not to resign? If so, what, for him, would represent so terrible a mistake that he would have to quit? Or does his landslide general election victory give him carte blanche to stay till voters throw him out, which is what he says? Third, is the new fight, I'm going nowhere Keir Starmer the real Keir Starmer? And if this come for me if you're hard enough Starmer is here to stay, will this combative persona reverse Labour's precipitate collapse in opinion polls? Here's the rub and one final uncertainty that flows from the rest. Can he really lead Labour into the next election as he claims? I do know one big thing. He is the weakest he's ever been. How so? Well, his appointment of Mandelson has undermined his party's respect for him. And when Anna Sawar called for him to resign, he only survived because his ministers, pretty much all of them, rallied round and endorsed him. What they have bestowed on him, political life, they can as easily withdraw. So they can now pretty much say or do what they like, because none are sackable. Pippa.
Keir Starmer's leadership looked like it was on the brink on Monday when Anna Sawar, his party's leader in Scotland, said he should go. MPs peered over the precipice, but they decided they didn't like what they saw. They tell me they're worried about throwing the country into more chaos with yet another change in Prime Minister. But the public isn't quite so concerned. This chart shows that almost half of people, 48%, think it would be a good thing to change Prime Minister this year, and just under 1 in 5, 18% say it would be bad. Even among Labour voters, 42% support the move, although 30% disagree. That might give anxious Labour MPs pause for thought. But it's not just the prospect of turmoil holding them back, it's also the lack of an obvious successor. While allies of both Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner do not deny that they're interested in the top job, neither of them is quite ready. The Health Secretary is trying to convince people he wasn't close to Peter Mandelson, while the former Deputy PM has a tax investigation hanging over her head. So despite anger, especially among Labour women, Starmer looks safe for now.
Thanks, Pippa. I actually want to turn to you first, Polly, because it sort of picks up on something I said at the beginning and then some data that Pippa just shared with us. More voters, and including more Labour voters, actually think your leader should go than want him to stay. So is Keir Starmer right that it is the right thing for him to stay?
Yeah, I do think it is the right thing for him to stay, because I think it's all very well for people to say, oh, yeah, no, get rid of him. It's a kind of be careful what you wish for situation here. We know the kind of instability that we experienced under those 4 Tory prime ministers, and that chaos is actually something that people voted to end. And we need to fulfil our mandate, which is to...
But it's pretty chaotic even without replacing the Prime Minister, isn't it?
But that is actually why there's been some serious talking amongst the PLP about buckling down and getting on with doing the job. And that includes, actually, some pretty serious conversations about the implications of what has been revealed by the Mandelson affair and so forth. Because this isn't just something that you can say, oh, there's a scandal, let's get a scalp and move on. This requires us to have a proper addressing of what actually what was very interesting today at Women's PLP. The Prime Minister of this great and wonderful nation, for the first time ever in my experience, actually accepted and acknowledged that there is such a thing as structural misogyny and is prepared to do something about it. Now, I think that's a big move, and that's what the women in the PLP in particular are pleased to see, that we might be able to see some change.
It is a big move, and actually we're going to come back and talk to you about that in slightly more detail in just a few minutes. But while we're on the subject of whether Prime Ministers should go or whether they will go, I assume you remember, that I think you were the first senior Tory to stand. You stood up in the House of Commons and you said that Boris Johnson should go. He didn't go for another few months, but, you know, the writing, I felt at the time, was pretty much on the wall for him. When you saw Anna Sarwar, the leader of the Labour Party in Scotland, yesterday saying that Keir Starmer had to go, did that look to you like the sort of David Davis moment? Do you think Keir Starmer can survive?
Not really. I think in truth, Sarwar may have been reflecting Scottish politics rather than national politics. But right enough, I mean, it is chaos. And it is a massive error. The whole Mandelson episode is a massive error. And there's really no way out of it. I don't think anybody gives any credit for that, oh, well, I was making a judgment or whatever. It was just the wrong decision, obvious at the time. So, you know, the trouble now, I think, for the Labour Party's point of view, or perhaps from Starmer's point of view, is he's now a captive of his own party. You know, he's no longer the leader, he's now the captive.
Which is very much the point I was making.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, the only reason he's still there, really, is because none of his... I mean, the Labour Party has a different structure to us. We basically execute the leader and then look for a replacement. They pretty much have to have the replacement before they remove the leader. And all the replacements are, for one reason or another, stymied. Rayner by tax affairs, Streeting by other matters, you know, and Miliband.
But that is also a reason why, actually, potentially, he may well survive.
Yeah.
I'm now going to sort of turn to Zack, leader of the Green Party. And we're going to do more of a sort of formal interview later, but I just want to sort of start with this particular point of what's likely to happen to the Labour Party now, because I think, you know, whether Starmer stays or indeed if he's replaced, the likelihood is that Labour will now move in a more leftward direction, which could cause you problems, couldn't it?
Well, I'd challenge the assumption, because I think the problems with the Labour Party aren't just with Keir Starmer. And let's be clear, there's been more resets than U-turns at this point. And I think there's only so many times you can turn it on and off before it's just not working. But actually, I think the problem is more fundamental than that. The problem is vested interests, arms traders, gambling companies, oil and gas, private healthcare. They've all donated to a Labour Party. So anyone who could be a future Labour leader is still taking donations from those companies, potentially. And that means they're not serving the interests of the British people. They're serving the interests of multimillionaires and billionaires. And I think that's what's broken in the Labour Party.
I'm sure Polly's going to want to come back on some of that in a minute or two.
Yeah.
And we will come back. But actually, I think what we should do now is go to a conversation I had a little bit earlier with Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary. And what I began by asking her was, you know, on a sort of scale of 1 to 10, how proud she was that she sits in a cabinet which has recently, or, you know, at the end of 2024, appointed a man, Peter Mandelson, who was an enabler of a paedophile billionaire. I say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how proud was she of being part of that government?
No, look, I mean, absolutely not proud at all. What's lower than 1 on a scale? I think it was a profound mistake and one that the Prime Minister deeply regrets. He's been very clear that he didn't know the full information at the time and that we've got to sort out the system to make sure that something like this can never happen again.
But I remain confused because I don't understand why the guy Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, who advises him on the appointment, decides he has to resign, but the man who actually makes the appointment, who had exactly the same information, that's Keir Starmer, doesn't feel he has to resign. What's going on? Doesn't make sense.
Well, I think there are two issues. One is about the quality of the advice and recommendation that the Prime Minister received, and the other is about whether Peter Mandelson was forthcoming in the information that he gave. And on both of those counts, I think we fell short. Morgan McSweeney felt that he had no choice but to resign. He felt that was the right thing to do. The Prime Minister feels, and I agree with him strongly, that he has a responsibility to apologise for that error of judgment and the vetting process that is not up to scratch. He has a responsibility to sort that out to make sure it never happens again, and he has a duty to the country to end the chaos that the country's been plunged into with chopping and changing of prime ministers and factional infighting, and get on with delivering the change that we promised the British people 18 months ago.
On a sort of personal level, given that you have been repeatedly briefed against by people around Keir Starmer, you've been demoted from various jobs for reasons that none of us really understood, is he in a sense sowing what he reaped by the way that he repeatedly destabilised you?
No, I mean, look, I've just, I'm pretty straight talking, and when, as you rightly say, I've been briefed against by people in the Prime Minister's circle, I've been completely straight with him about how unacceptable that is, and I believe that he is sincere in hating that culture of briefings, particularly briefings against women, of which there have been far too many and it has been far too frequent, and is sincere about wanting to stamp that out. I think we need to see far less of these misogynistic briefings. We need far more women around every table where decisions are being made, and we need to make sure that we model that change that we're creating out there in the country.
And just briefly on that point, we've seen the clear out just in the last 72 hours of the three most powerful men in Downing Street. Do you think, therefore, that means that the Prime Minister now will get rid of what many thought was a toxic macho culture?
Well, I think he's really sincere about stamping that out wherever he sees it and wherever he finds it. And, one of the conversations that we've had is about the need to be really proactive in making sure that that happens. That means you need the right people sitting in those rooms, sitting around the table, because, of course, you'll know, Robert, from reading those absolutely disgusting revelations in the Epstein files, that the way in which this is enabled in the end is people turning a blind eye.
But, Lisa, in terms of turning a blind eye, another thing that, many of us simply don't understand is there's an article on the front page of the Sunday Times which says that the former Director of Communications, Matt Doyle, campaigned for a man to be a councillor who was being prosecuted for really heinous child sex crimes, and yet he still gets appointed to the House of Lords. How on earth did that happen? Because the information was already in the public domain.
Yeah, so let me just be really clear. At the point at which the Prime Minister put in forwards, that information was not there, and I understand that Matthew Doyle had not been forthcoming about the extent of that relationship. But you are absolutely right to say that before that appointment was ratified and finalised and eventually made, that front page appeared in the Sunday Times with those revelations.
Why didn't it block it? Why didn't it block it?
Yeah, so the question of why action wasn't taken more swiftly is one that I don't have an answer to. I understand there is an inquiry underway looking at our processes and systems in the Labour Party and looking at the government's vetting processes and procedures as well. I would really like to be really open and transparent with your viewers. I think they deserve it and I think they need those answers, but I'm sorry to say that at the moment I don't have them.
And as for Doyle himself, you've taken the whip away from him, but shouldn't you get him kicked out the House of Lords full stop?
I don't think it should have been awarded in the first place. I don't think I'm the only person who thinks that, by the way. I think the Prime Minister shares that view. But I really think it sends out all the wrong signals to the country and to victims and survivors of sexual abuse, particularly where it involves children, that when we have people sitting in the legislature who haven't been forthcoming about those connections and have had long-standing connections with people even after they've been accused in this case and convicted in others.
Harriet Harman came up with what sounded like a really good suggestion to me, that the position of First Secretary should be revived, should be given to a woman member of the Cabinet, and my suggestion is it should go to you. What do you think?
I've just been elevated. This is very exciting. I mean, obviously, Robert, I'm not going to disagree with that very, very excellent suggestion. But what I would also say is, as well as having women in very senior roles, and don't forget we're the government that appointed the first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer just 18 months ago, which is extraordinary. That hasn't happened before. As well as having women in those very senior roles, we do need men to step up as well. This is not something that can be won just by women alone, and men have to be allies. They have to step up, they have to call this stuff out, and they have to walk alongside us to achieve the sort of culture that we want to achieve.
Hear to all that. Lisa, Nandy, as always, very good to see you.
Thank you.
Now, Keir Starmer was at a meeting of the Women's Parliamentary Labour Party this afternoon, and he had various women Labour MPs address him. Emma Lewell, who spent years working in child protection, talked about how much it hurt to be screamed at in the street that she was a member of the Pedo Protectors Party. Ali McGovern talked about, pressed him on to change the culture in Number 10. Tonya Antonazi talked about male aides briefing against women. Lisa Nandy is also clearly not willing to be quiet. You were at the PLP meeting this afternoon, Polly. Has the dam broken?
I think the mood and tone of a women's PLP, as distinct from a PLP with the men in it, is very, very different. We are, of course, raised to be polite. We were very polite and respectful to the Prime Minister. But I think what was most striking was this admission from him that there is structural misogyny, not just in our party, but across the political class. And I think that's an opportunity for him, with that admission, to do a little bit like what Lisa said, is like bring everybody together to start drawing a line under it and to hunt out that misogyny where it exists. Because it's on a sliding scale, the risk is that we put people like Epstein as like monsters in a box, as though they're nothing to do with the rest of the society in which they actually live and exist. And so we need to understand that bad decisions are made when you have a groupthink, when everybody in the room either looks or has the same kind of experience as each other. And that is one of the things that we need to change. Accepting that is a reality is really important from the Prime Minister. What we want as the Women's PLP, and I think what was very clear, was we need to start seeing some challenges to those power structures. One is clearing out lobbyists from the Lords. They get paid 300 quid a day, tax-free, even before they get paid by their private clients. That needs to stop. We also know that the media ends up being part of the problem. Let's crack down on particularly the toxicity of social media, which is making it so difficult for us to be able to have a decent national conversation and is threatening the well-being of our young people. And finally, make sure that we do have that First Secretary of State is a woman who has the brief to hunt out misogyny in our political class wherever they find it.
So it's very well wanting all of these things and putting them in front of the Prime Minister. And by all accounts, this afternoon, he was saying the right things to people. But what, in his history as Prime Minister over the last 18 months, gives you the confidence that he will actually deliver?
Well, I think what's important to remember is that he has a track record on understanding the importance of, for example, tackling violence against women and girls.
Yes, but he appointed Peter Mandelson, and
understanding.
He also gave Matthew Doyle a peerage.
Well, that's why we need to be able to draw a line under those kind of decisions, and that's particularly about who is in the room and what those vetting processes are like. But I think what's important about the recognition today is you can't just put tackling violence against women in a box and give it to a few women on the side. That has to be tackled more broadly. I think because of what he did in the DPP and prioritising that then, this is an opportunity for him to take that experience and bring it into politics and do something really big, which actually will speak to all the women at home who are thinking, yeah, I know what it's like when I'm sat in a room and suddenly I'm silenced or just asked to make the tea when I thought I had an opinion, or where suddenly you think you're speaking through soundproof glass because nobody is taking any notice of you, or indeed you are marginalised and victimised at work. That's the reality of a lot of people in this country, and we can do something about it.
But isn't the problem with all of this is that it detracts from the actual work that the government's doing on things like tackling violence against women and girls? And what people hear, what people see, is a Prime Minister that appointed somebody like Peter Mandelson, that gave a peerage to somebody like Matthew Doyle. And whatever his Labour MPs talk to me all the time about feeling that he's a decent man and his heart's in the right place and he really gets this. He's spent his whole career working in this field and for the same. and people don't hear that.
Well, I think what's interesting is what a lot of women find quite irritating is the idea that this is something that is a distraction from getting on with the job. Tackling misogyny and sexism in our country is the job of a Labour government, and that is what I think we have got the opportunity to be able to take this forward now, because if we simply say it's a scandal and a scalp and we can all move on, we've changed a little bit of the personnel, nothing to see here, we will end up in the same situation again. So it does require something really fundamental, and that's why I think Harriet Harman's proposal is a really strong one, but it will require a cultural change that actually makes things quite difficult and uncomfortable for people who are used to having all the decisions in their box.
Yeah, I mean, there is another opportunity for change, because until literally they all resigned this weekend, the three biggest jobs in Downing Street were all men.
Dudes, aren't they?
So,
exactly.
you know, maybe that will now...
And then we wonder why decisions are bad.
I think many people will be agreeing with you on that particular issue. Now, we've got so much more to discuss. I've got an interview with Zack Polanski of the Greens to come. I do need to point out, I've been told that Matthew Doyle, who we've been discussing, has pointed out that the councillor, who's called Sean Morton, the one who was prosecuted and found guilty of, as I say, heinous sex crimes against children, what Doyle says is that he was told by his friend, even while he was being prosecuted, that he was innocent, and Doyle has apologised for believing his friend and not supporting and continuing to support him prior to the conviction. So that's the Doyle position. Hasn't stopped him losing the whip or being warned by Lisa Nandy that he's got to be turfed out the House of Lords. Now, don't go away, because there's going to be more after the break from Zack, David and Polly, and I'll also be finding out whether Keir Starmer can actually survive from the man who knows more about that sort of thing than anybody, Sir John Curtice.
Welcome to the break. Now, as you all know, the Winter Olympics are underway. I'm sure you've been watching it as often as you can. So we decided to do our very own curling tournament here in the studio. Good Scottish sport, with a little bit of a political twist. Now, it's been a difficult week for Labour, lots of speculation about who may at some point take over from Keir Starmer. So each of these stones, these curling stones at the bottom here in yellow and blue, carries the name of a potential contender. So Polly, David and Zack, if you draw one stone each at random, you're going to slide it across our board, and whichever name ends up closest to the red centre is the Peston prophecy. So David, right, pick one and you slide it on the...
Like that?
Yep.
Whoop.
Oh, and this was Ed Miliband. Turn it around to the camera. He's done not too badly. Zack?
My parliamentary neighbour.
Ooh, Al turns off the table. We'll get him later.
You're not running my leadership campaign.
John Healey, the Defence Secretary. Now, by my estimation, John Healey is closest to the middle. Have we got one more? OK, David, you do one more and then we'll lift him off the next one.
Blue one?
Yeah. So David's got Shabana Mahmood, who's tucked in behind Ed Miliband. We'll leave that for now.
Actually, my favourite.
And we'll do the rest in the second break. Thank you very much. Come back for part two.
Welcome back. In a moment or two, I'll be talking with Zack Polanski, leader of the Greens. But now joining me from Scotland is the legendary polling expert, Sir John Curtice. John, how lovely to see you. We're living through turbulent times. Keir Starmer thinks he can keep his job all the way to the next general election. Can he?
Well, that depends ultimately on whether or not Labour MPs feel that he's capable of winning another victory in 2029, or whether alternatively they come to the conclusion that they might be better off replacing him with somebody else. What happened on Monday was the beginnings of a possibility that maybe there would begin to be a sequence of resignations, but within a couple of hours, as nobody followed up on Anna Sarwar's call for him to resign, we knew that it certainly wasn't going to happen in immediate time. The things that help to keep Starmer in position at the moment, well, one, it is that, there are elections coming up on May the 7th, and many a Labour MP would not want they to be fought against the backdrop of what is likely to be a fractious and divisive leadership campaign, because there isn't an obvious immediate successor. The second is, I think it's pretty clear that so far as both Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting is concerned, two of the possible alternatives, the time is not right. Angela Rayner still needs to find out from the HMRC as whether she's going to be fined over her buying a property in Hove, and Wes Streeting is known to be rather close to Lord Manderson. He would like a little bit of time and distance between the current story and any leadership contest. But the truth is, Keir Starmer is there in a sense as much to do with the weaknesses of his opponents and the circumstances of the time as it is in any evidence in the polls that Keir Starmer might be able to turn things around. He is deeply unpopular. His party is running on average at 20% in the opinion polls. This is a now continuing record low for Labour. And if things aren't better than that by May the 7th, the party is heading for defeat in Scotland, defeat for the first time since 1931 in Wales, and quite possibly coming third in both contests, losing quite a lot of seats in the English local council elections, perhaps not quite so bad in London because they're still ahead in the polls there, but in places like Barnsley, Sunderland, Leave voting territory, all the council seats up for grabs, potentially bad news for the Labour Party. If are things as bad after May the 7th as they appear to be according to the polls at the moment, and there's no guarantee of that, then I think there must be question marks amongst Labour MPs about whether Sir Keir Starmer should go, unless indeed between now and then he's changed his style as a Prime Minister, has begun to tell the country in what direction he wishes to take it, that he is indeed liberated by the resignation of Morgan McSweeney, and that therefore, as a result, they begin to gain some confidence in his leadership. But he hasn't got much time to do that in.
I mean, I think you're broadly saying that if it's as bad as it looks, it would be rational for them to get rid of him. Why is he so unpopular, though? He's more unpopular than both Truss and Johnson, which is almost impossible to believe.
Well, it depends on which measure you look at, etc., etc. I mean, the first thing to say is that all of our leaders are unpopular because all of our parties are unpopular. We have to remember we've moved in British politics from an era in which two parties dominated the public, and therefore, insofar as the public's view of a leader is partly dependent on which party they support, it's become so much more difficult for anybody to be popular. But beyond that, the problem that people say, it's the same problem as most political commentators say, they don't know what he stands for. When you get those word clouds, the word that comes out is bland and boring. And, beyond that, therefore, given that he doesn't convey a sense of direction, doesn't convey a sense of vision, frankly, doesn't have much in the way of charisma. The various U-turns of the government, some of which have been more damaging than others, and the one that everybody still remembers is the winter fuel allowance, these have gradually eroded people's confidence in the ability of this government to do what, above all, they wanted the government to do after 2024, which is to turn around the economy and to turn around the health service.
So apart from all that, John, he's doing an absolutely brilliant job. Now, Pippa, I need, though, to get some data from you before I go back to John.
You do. Well, my fellow Scots are quite critical of the party leaders at the moment, as John suggested, with around half saying that they dislike the First Minister, John Swinney, and his Labour rival, Anna Sarwar, with net favourabilities of -14 and -28, respectively. But Sarwar has a bigger problem. The boss of the Westminster branch, Keir Starmer, is even more unpopular at minus 64%, hence why Sarwar threw him under the bus. Now, polls predict the SNP to stay in power, with Reform threatening to push Labour into third place in Scotland. We don't know where people stand yet on the new leader of Reform in Scotland. His boss, Nigel Farage, polls better than Starmer, but worse than either Swinney or Sarwar. So will Sarwar's gamble pay off?
That's the question I want to put to John. John, if you're still there, just looking at how unpopular Starmer is in Scotland, I mean, some people in the Labour Party think Sarwar made a bit of a fool of himself, calling for Starmer to go and then, frankly, nobody joining in with him from the Labour Party. But was it rational for Sarwar to distance himself from Starmer in that way?
Yes, from his point of view, yes. I think the honest truth is that you're looking at somebody who had come to realise that he was sitting in a car that was about to crash at the end of a cul-de-sac, and where, you know, the cause of that is the fact that the UK government is unpopular, not just with people in Scotland in general. It is unpopular with the people who voted for Labour in Scotland back in July 2024. The one thing he still had to hand was the steering wheel in front of him. He's just decided to twist the steering wheel. He didn't know where the car was going. He just had to hope that maybe the car might stop in a rather softer place than the crash barrier to which it was heading. But the truth is, whether or not he's ended up in a better place, very debatable. It's proving very, very difficult for the Labour Party in Scotland to distance itself from the perceived record of the UK Labour government. And I mean, to give you one indication, at least those people who voted for the SNP in 2024 actually think that the Scottish government, the SNP Scottish government, is doing a good job. Even the people who voted Labour in Scotland in 2024 do not think the UK Labour government is doing a good job. That is very, very difficult to escape from.
It is very difficult to escape. I've got one final question. You were talking earlier about the extraordinary fragmentation in British politics. Right now, can you see any scenario when in the coming years up to the election we see the emergence of a dominant party on the left or right, or are we just stuck with fragmentation in your view?
Well, there are two main reasons why we've got fragmentation at the structural level. The first is class no longer defines who votes Labour and who votes Conservative. That fundamental demographic anchor of a traditional two-party system of middle-class people voting Conservative, working-class people voting Labour has gone. Secondly, our politics is no longer about left and right, about the question of economic inequality. It's also about the culture wars. It is culture wars issues, for example, that define who supports reform. That makes it much more difficult to bring together a relatively large coalition. Now, it may be that if indeed this government can turn around the economy, can turn around the health service, and either under Keir Starmer or somebody else can provide the people that they've got a Prime Minister that they can trust, they're enthused about, then maybe Labour may be able to recover. And maybe Kemi Badenoch may indeed begin to be able to turn around the Conservative Party. But they both faced big structural problems in achieving that, let alone the policy challenges that they both have before them.
John, as always, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm going to pick up, actually, with Zack on one element. John Curtice is talking about quite how badly Labour is performing nationally. You're picking up that they're performing pretty badly in Gorton and Denton when we've got this by-election coming. So why on earth didn't you stand there? You're actually from the area. I mean, were you just too scared?
Well, at the moment, Gorton and Denton is really clearly a race between the Green Party and Reform. In Hannah Spencer,
I don't think there's data there about that. That's what you're just picking this up as a feeling, aren't you?
Well, I think it's as simple as when you look at that contest, it's between a local plumber who's actually from the area and a man who makes money by sitting on a right-wing, supposedly news TV channel spewing hate. In terms of me, I've been a London Assembly member for the last 5 years. I've lived in London for 20 years. I'm confident in our local candidates. And I think it says a lot about the Labour Party that they're putting that out as an attack line, that I didn't parachute myself halfway across the country to a seat where I know we can win.
But you grew up literally, a few hundred yards down the road from there, so you are a local in that sense.
But I've lived in London for 20 years, so I just think, politicians can feed a line about I'm a local. I serve Londoners, and so I live in London, I'll be standing in the London seat.
And just on just one more on this before we move off something as narrow as this by-election. Would you have... I mean, if it's the case that reform comes through because the left vote is split between you and Labour, would you have no regrets about that?
Well, we can never say that Labour are a left-wing vote. This is the same party that wanted to slash disability benefits but had to be shamed not to do it. It's the same party that eventually lifted the two-child benefit cap, but it took over 18 months of children living in poverty, and it's the same party that is arming an ongoing genocide in Gaza. So I don't think under any metric you can say this Labour Party represents the left in this country, and that's why the Green Party are doing so well, and that's why I'm confident but not complacent we can win in Gorton and Denton.
I keep saying you. I'm not saying anything. I'm asking you questions. But anyway, look, we've been discussing the Gorton and Denton by-elections. So here is a full list of the candidates who are standing. You can see these details and much more coverage on ITV News. Now, David, I want to sort of move on to another story that's around, which is the fact that literally just a year on from appointing Chris Wormold as the most powerful civil servant in the country, Keir Starmer is pushing him out, sacking him. What does that say about the Prime Minister that he apparently got that appointment, from his point of view, badly wrong?
Well, he seems to have got every appointment wrong. I mean, that's one of the problems here. Wormold, his history at the Department of Health was not terrific. I mean, he was not thought to have done a good job of running COVID. Before then, he was entangled in the tainted blood scandal and handling that. So he didn't have a good record behind him. So, you know, it was a poor decision. I think at the time, quite a lot of people thought it was a poor decision. The problem is, he's got difficulty finding a really star performer to replace him. I can't see a Jeremy Hayward. I can't see a Mark Sedwell. I can't see any of
Well, there was this slightly jaw-dropping thing, actually, I don't know if you saw on I think it was on Channel 4 News earlier on tonight. The favourite to replace Chris Wormold, and the reports in the Times were that the Prime Minister's already made up his mind. He wants to appoint the Permanent Secretary from the Home Office, Antonio Romeo, as the new Cabinet Secretary. Simon MacDonald, until recently Permanent Secretary at the Foreign Office, basically went on Channel 4 News, said this would be a very, very bad mistake, that there needs to be a proper vetting process, and said, would not give details, but just said, you know, this could potentially be another very serious problem for the Prime Minister. Do you know anything about what this is about?
No, I don't. I don't know, Antonio.
I mean, is it another boys' club stitch up against a woman?
Well, it might be, but what I would say is that the one line of that I could say is absolutely right, is there should be a proper vetting process. Have we not learnt that lesson? I mean, Lord knows how many cabinet ministers have fallen on their sword in the last year. And of course, the Mandelson episode, the one you just talked about, it beggars belief, frankly, that these people are appointed without a proper check. You know, I can remember going into public service and having a 6-month-long positive vetting process, you know, not the sort of back of envelope they're doing now, for really, really important jobs. So, yes, they need a proper vetting.
They need a proper process. We're going to move on from this because we've got this proprietary poll that we do all the time, which is fantastically interesting. Pippa.
It is, yes. It's our Youth Tracker time, our regular poll of young people on all the big political issues. And for the first time, we're now including 16 and 17-year-olds, as the voting age is, of course, being lowered. Now, this is voting intention for Westminster amongst this age group, which shows that Zack's Green Party is in the lead among 16 to 25-year-olds on 34%. They're followed by Labour on 28% and Reform UK on 18%. And among the youngest in this cohort, the Greens are even further ahead, over 40%. Now, that's voters who might be thinking about going to university. Just before the budget, we asked young people if they thought that uni was worth the money. Most disagreed, with almost a quarter firmly rejecting the idea. And the Chancellor might have made things worse at the budget by freezing the threshold at which graduates need to start paying back their loans. Intergenerational unfairness has become a defining political issue. Now, Zack, you've said already that university fees are outrageous. What do you plan to do about it? Would you write them off?
Well, first of all, I think we do need to abolish tuition fees altogether. And we also need to look at bringing back maintenance grants. I think also we need to stop this freeze that's dragging people into those thresholds. More widely, I personally do want a conversation about debt forgiveness. I went to university when it was £3,000. 20 years later, I've only just paid that off. I spoke today to one of the Young Greens co-chairs of the Green Party. They've just come out of university with £76,000 worth of debt, and every single year it's going up a couple of grand. That's not sustainable.
But the value of outstanding loans is set to reach, by the end of March 2025, it did reach, in fact, 267 billion quid. What would you cut to do that debt forgiveness?
Well, this is why we need to look at spending multipliers. Ultimately, an educated population is good for our economy. Ultimately means we can be productive, we can get investment going around the economy. At the moment, ladening people with private debt is no future for young people. So sure, this is going to be expensive, but it's about political priorities. Right now, the government have shown that young people aren't their political priority. And what I'm saying is I'm concerned about the future of young people in this country.
Polly, just on one of the things that was on the screen there, which actually slightly made my jaw drop, only 1 in 10 young people strongly agree that going to university is a good thing. I'm sort of staggered that it's as low as that. I was quite struck. I don't know if you saw, Andy Burnham sort of coming out for the Prime Minister a couple of days ago. One of the things he said at the Resolution Foundation is he thought it was one of the most disgraceful things that the Blair government had ever done was to set this 50% target for young people going to university. Do you agree with Burnham on that?
No, I don't. I do, however, think that what Keir has said about making sure that you have a broad range of opportunities for young people is really important. And that's why I think that's one of the things that I feel really strongly about, because I am seeing young people in my constituencies, one of the most deprived in the southeast. 10% of the population in my community are part of the most deprived in the country. And I want to make sure that they have access to opportunities, which at the moment they're not getting, partly because it's really difficult to navigate your way through the pathways to get decent apprenticeships. If you want to go to university, you fill in the UCAS form, the universities choose which one whether you're suitable for it. The paths are quite simple. Apprenticeships, it's much harder, and there are not good pathways into opportunities for a wide range of young people across the country, and particularly in coastal areas like ours. So a strong industrial strategy, proper amount of apprenticeships, and decent support for student finance are all things we need to ensure that we've got.
Right. It's a bit of a scandal.
I agree with Burnham, actually. I mean, on this, because one thing we don't know about is what the write-off rate is for the current liability now. It's probably north of 10 billion.
It's huge.
Huge.
It's huge.
So we should recognise that and recognise that in exchange for that, we're getting something which is not delivering jobs for youngsters. That's why only 1 in 10 think is a great idea. It's because they come out of university, they're not equipped for a proper job.
Yeah, I think that is certainly part of the very serious problem at the moment. Both of you don't go away. Zack, I'm coming back to you in a moment or two. Much more on the Youth Tracker, and, frankly, we might talk a little bit about the part owner of Manchester United's extraordinary comics about immigrants in a couple of minutes.
Wait. OK, part two. Polly is now scooshing Wes Streeting up. Oh, yeah, he's behind John Healy. We've got Zack with Angela Rayner also behind. Andy Burnham from David. Is that? And the last one is Keir Starmer. Oh, he's out. So the winner is our Peston prophecy for the next Prime Minister of the UK or Leader Labour Party. Is Robert. Can you see who it is?
Can't from here, who is it?
It's Miliband.
Is there the only one that claims he doesn't want it?
Polly, what do you think, Polly? Would he make a good future leader of the Labour Party? You were his chief of staff.
I think that Ed knows as well as everyone else that he was well inoculated from that experience before, and he's not going to do it again.
He's not going to do it again. So take him out of the frame, and then the next one was Shabana Mahmood. Could she do it?
I don't think so, but that's because I think that Keir Starmer needs to crack on and get on with doing the job.
OK,
I would say Shabana's an improved.
Oh, well, there we go then. Shabana gets the Tory vote, and we're just going to pop Keir in the middle since he's Prime Minister just now, just to end it off. There you go. Thanks very much.
If it works like that.
It only worked like that for him.
Welcome back, and we've got more on the youth tracker from Pippa.
We do get plenty of it tonight. Now, David, I want to show you something from our youth tracker, which is that we asked 16 to 25-year-olds if they wanted to rejoin the EU. And the response was pretty resounding. 83% are in favour. And I remember none of these young people that we polled would have been able to vote in 2016. So, David, you were Brexit Secretary then. Do you think the young people have got it wrong?
Yeah, I do.
My God, that's the most shocking thing you said all night.
Well, you know, who was it that said, if you're not left-wing at 20, you haven't got a heart? Well, this is the modern equivalent, really. I'm not surprised.
Doesn't it worry you, though?
No, it'll change over time, as they learn.
So, well, you say that. Do you think...
Or not, David.
Do you not think that it means that at some point in the future they'll undo your Brexit?
Well, it's possible. I mean, this government might undo my Brexit. It's trying to do it by the back door anyway, but I don't think so.
I mean, Zack, I can't remember. Are you firmly in favour of rejoining?
Firmly, very much in favour.
So you're the only party...
Well, I think Brexit's been a disaster under any criteria and any measure, whether it's economically, socially, culturally. And actually, I think right now we should be talking about rejoining the customs union, but more widely, I do want to see us back in the European Union.
Polly, this is a major problem for the Labour Party because very large numbers of people who are instinctively Labour voters are supporting the Greens on this issue because they think you are unbelievably feeble on the EU.
No, I think what's really interesting is, I mean, I have these conversations on the doorstep quite often where people say, why won't you make us join the EU? And I said, well, you need to ask to be let back in, for a start off, and not to put too fine a point on it. David and his cronies walked into the party, smashed everything up and left. And then it's very difficult to turn around and say, oh, I'm really sorry, can we come back in, please, and expect to get a resounding welcome. We need to re-engage much more carefully with our closest neighbours and our biggest international market in order to be able to get to a place where we can grow the economy.
So
That's straightforward.
It's
just practical. No, what I'm saying is we need to have practical relationship with our European neighbours because they are they're a massive market, and at the moment we're not getting the benefits we should do, and that's because of the consequences of what you did. No, I'm not saying that.
Why aren't you saying it, Polly? I think what David is saying is why aren't you want all the benefits of joining without joining? You're not going to get all the benefits of joining without joining. It's not going to happen.
What you need to do is you need to have a conversation with your neighbours about how you're going to get on with it.
And which they then say you can't have what you want.
Well, then that's about negotiation, isn't it? And rather than saying, oh, thanks very much, we've changed our mind and just walk back in like the Greens claim they would do, that's preposterous and won't happen. And that's pretty much like
I don't disagree with you that much on this, Polly. I don't think we're rejoining tomorrow. I think we need to rebuild relationships, but particularly in light of Donald Trump.
Yes, but unfortunately, what you're
unpredictable American president.
What you're saying is, oh, we would rejoin the EU.
I said rejoin when the conditions are right, starting with
impossible, and is not about having a grown-up relationship.
Believe it or not, I find this almost impossible if we're not going to resolve this tonight. So I am going to move this on because... You know, the part owner of Manchester United, multi-billionaire Jim Ratcliffe, does an interview today in which he uses... he says the UK has been colonised by immigrants. Really, many would say, inflammatory, unpleasant language. The Prime Minister has told him to apologise. Do all of you think he should apologise for using that kind of language?
I think they were disgusting comments, but we have to remember Keir Starmer was the one that echoed Enoch Powell with his Island of Strangers speech.
For which he has also apologised, but... Polly.
I mean, I don't really know why we're taking any notice of this man. He's complaining about a number of people in this country. He's not one of them. He's a tax exile in Monaco. And I'm afraid to go back to our original conversation. I wonder why we spend so much money, so much time listening to elderly white men and their opinions. I think we should be ignoring him and marginalising him and rather listen to the people who are in this country, who are contributing and want to make this country better.
Now, obviously, there's nothing elderly about you, David, but nonetheless, I want your view on this.
Well, I just think he's plumb wrong, and it's sort of obvious he's wrong. Yes, he should apologise. Look, what is the overwhelming British national characteristic? It's tolerance and acceptance of other people. And that's... Mr Ratcliffe is not showing that at all. He ought to apologise.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a pretty unpleasant thing for him to have said. If we could go back briefly to this Doyle thing, it doesn't seem to be going. It doesn't seem to be going away. Do you understand yet, Polly, how the Prime Minister could have just got it so wrong?
Well, I think we're going to have to find out what happened. I was interested to hear what Lisa had to say. Clearly, there's some issues to do with vetting, and we need to make sure that those processes work properly. But I think we need to understand that vetting, I mean, I'm not familiar with all of the ins and outs of how the vetting procedure works, but I do know that quite a lot of it can be done almost with algorithms, and then they end up with people in a room making a decision and a judgment. And as I said in the House of Commons last week, and I will continue to say, if we continue to leave people in the room who decide that those people are worth the risk, we end up with bad decisions.
There's also something called the smell test, which people seem to have forgotten about. But anyway, that's it. There's a new government motto: time flies when the Prime Minister is on the ropes, which means next week, believe it or not, it's recess already. We'll be back the following week. See you then.